Thank you. My question first in terms of the methodology of the index. There are indicators within the 3 dimensions. So how you weighted and how you came to the weight. Do you give the indicators equal weighted within, because there are some important indicators within 1 dimension. So the weighting, because you didn't mention in the presentation. Second question is in terms of, because data quality is very critical, and validity, reliability, and especially timeliness of the data is very important. And when I look into the data, mostly secondary data sources, and how reliable you think and valid the data, and in terms of, to make sure that the data quality issues. And the last question is, I think now World Bank, they started a new, in terms of categorizing the global economy into 5 categories. And I think having that is very important standardization, so that, because all countries, having global index is very important, and I think it's a good initiative. But moving forward, if you have based on agricultural economies, because the policies, all the factors are different. So having 4 or 5 categories and having some standard within this one, it's very important to add value of this index to improve the cross-learning across the countries. Because what is the final added value if we don't, so I think, do you have any plan in terms of thinking to have not the same standard across the whole country, but having different economies and having, standards for the index and relative index, so that coming up also for different economies to add value for the index. So these are my questions. Thank you.
Okay, I'll take those questions. The first one, on the weights, we used an expert panel, so we consulted people who know more than the EIU on food security to attribute the importance to the individual indicators and the categories. So that's how we ended up with a weighting of 40% on the first category, 44 on the second, and 16 on the third. Within the Excel workbook I showed, you can change those weights. You can manipulate those weights and decide to disagree with the panel and have your own weights, and you will have different results. And you can do that throughout time, within each of the index workbooks. The second question, I believe, was on data quality. We rely quite heavily, as I've mentioned, on international organizations, and we work very closely with them on many topics, not just food security. We rely on them for a lot of what we do at the EIU, which is macroeconomic forecasting as well, to provide for valid and reliable data. We know they have statisticians and econometricians within the organizations who do the data checking, but we also have a team in-house who does the same thing. So we have statistical methods to test whether the data that comes in is valid or not. So that's one of the exercises we always perform when constructing an index.
Okay, very good. Okay, let me have one question, but short, not this and that. And then, by the way, one short question, yes?
Okay, thank you. Alice Rubeza, UNDP. Just how do you account for the environment and natural resource base? Is that covered under availability?
Yeah, it is covered under availability as one of the indicators we follow.
I couldn't hear your answer.
Yes, it is covered under availability as one of the indicators. One of several. I mean, just to add to that last point, we look at over 3,500 and 600 indicators when we're compiling this. It's quantitative and qualitative questions are addressed. Please go into the spreadsheet and you'll see it's a very comprehensive, highly detailed workings behind the numbers. And you can do regional comparison and country comparisons as well.
Sure. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much. I'm Bwana from Agriculture Kenya. Now, I like what you have given to us and the indicators and the research that you have done. But what I really want to know is once you've done these researches and have gotten your findings, how do you get the feedback back to the farmers? Do you have a system of knowing if, like if you're dealing with the Kenyan government, maybe you've given back your feedback, do you have a system where you can learn that this information is sunk down to the common farmer?
Mm-hmm. It'll be reflected how effective the government follows up the weak areas in the following year. How you use the tool is really up to you. You can identify the strengths and weaknesses we've just seen. Ethiopia is doing very well in the first two key indicators. It needs to speed ahead with the nutritional value. These are the two areas we've seen consistently improving: affordability and availability. And the third category is either declining or staying put. It's not making the right progress. So when you look at the index from a government's perspective, you can see clearly which areas you have to work on in policy, and whether it's partly 100% policy or partly with the private sector, what you need to do for the farmers to improve that particular category. And once you move on that, it'll be reflected in the data and the rankings the following year. Uganda has actually actively looked at the tool in the last 2 years and taken the necessary steps in not all the areas. You're really looking at a sector that has been mismanaged for over 40 years. You're just moving in the right direction, whether it's in Ethiopia, Kenya, or Niger. So what you're trying to do is develop a sector that is going to take a hell of a lot longer to put in the right direction to get that food security. In the process, it is important that the stakeholders, whether it's the government or DEPON or the NGOs, are addressing it effectively.
Great. So I see there's a lot of interest on the topic. I've got 5 minutes to go, so I'm going to have to wrap up this session. We've done today an overview of the index. We've looked at a demonstration just to give a sense of what it's all about and how you can navigate it. And then we've generated a dialogue with lots and lots of questions on this and that. And that's exactly the purpose of the index, to generate dialogue that will spur us to finding solutions. So to conclude, I'd like to ask Lystra to come and give the last remarks. And I must say thank you very much for the discussions. And if you still have questions at the end, please come and address them with the panel up front here.